Stillness covered everything, quiet without shape or boundary. Then the voice moved over the surface, calling the first light forward to stand. Light separated from darkness, morning and evening took their places. The first rhythm entered the world, time began to walk its path.
Everything rose at his word, every element held its place, every breath carried intention.
Waters gathered beneath the sky, dry land stood firm, seas rolled to their limits. The earth waited for life to rise, green spread across the ground, seed and fruit filled the soil, every living thing marked its kind, a growing world beneath the sun.
Everything rose at his word, every element held its place, every breath carried intention. Creatures filled the waters, birds filled the sky. Beasts moved over the earth, every movement affirmed his design. Everything rose at his word, every element held its place, every breath carried intention. Human beings stood in his image, the world rested under his gaze, and it was very good. The garden held everything they needed, every path open before them, work without burden, life without fear. The serpent questioned the command. Desire stirred where it never belonged. A single taste tore the bond. Silence followed their choice. The ground carried judgment. The serpent carried curse. The gate closed behind them. Eyes opened with unwanted clarity. Shame gripped their bodies. They hid among the trees, trying to escape the voice. The Lord walked in the cool of the day. His question cut through the leaves. Blame shifted without honesty. Truth stood uncovered. a descendant would strike the deceiver, hope buried beneath consequence. The ground carried judgment, the gate closed behind them. They stepped into exile with only memory of the garden and the faint promise that loss would not be final.
Two brothers brought what they had. One came with firstborn strength, the other came with token effort. The Lord looked at the heart behind each gift. Cain felt his pride collapse, his face fell hard. The warning came with clarity, sin waited near him, ready to claim him. Your brother's blood cries from the ground. He spoke calmly to Abel, but his intent was already settled. The field waited for violence, the earth received the life he struck down. The Lord called him to answer, he tried denial, but the ground exposed him, the truth refused to bend. Your brother's blood cries from the ground. Rest would flee from him, yet mercy placed aside for his protection. He walked away carrying the weight, a wanderer without home. His choice echoed through generations. The first grave stood in silent testimony. Your brother's blood cries from the ground. The earth held the memory, and the Lord saw every loss.
Human thoughts reach constant corruption. Violence covered every street. The Lord looked on the earth with grief, yet Noah walked with a different heart.
God spoke of an end soon to arrive. Instructions shaped the ark. Wood joined to wood under patient labor, a shelter built against coming judgment. I set my covenant before you. The world will rise again. The fountains broke open, rain fell without pause. The ark lifted from the ground. Everything familiar disappeared beneath the water. For many days the world held only silence, no shore to be seen, only endless water. And the hope that God would remember, I set my covenant before you. The world will rise again. A wind crossed the surface, waters began to retreat. The raven circled without rest. The dove returned with a leaf that carried calm certainty. The ark settled on distant mountains. Dry land slowly emerged. Noah stepped out to worship. The Lord spoke peace over the earth. I set my covenant before you. The world will rise again. Oh, bows stretched across the clouds, a sign that mercy stood over judgment. They gathered on the plain of Shinar. One speech carried through the crowd. Their plan grew bold, their hands worked in swift agreement. Brick met fire, ambition settled in their voices. They aimed upward with confidence, seeking a name that would endure. The tongues divided, the nations sent out. Oh, 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 oh. The Lord came to observe. Their unity turned toward self-glory. Restraint became necessary. Their project lost its foundation. Confusion spread through the workers. Voices no longer aligned. Frustration broke their purpose. The tower stood unfinished. The tongues divided, the nations sent out.
prevented greater harm. Each group carried new speech. Distance replaced uniform ambition. Boundaries returned by God's will. The tongues divided, the nations sent out. The plain emptied, and the world moved forward under new languages. Oh. Leave your land, leave your family. Walk to the place I will show you. I will make your name endure in blessing.
Abram stepped out without a map, his certainty anchored only in God. Each camp marked another step away. Each altar marked another act of trust. He walked by a word he could not see. He walked by a word he could not see. Famine drove him to Egypt. Fear pushed him into failure, yet God preserved him. The promise remained untouched.
He returned with deeper clarity. He called on the Lord again. The land opened before him. The voice repeated its assurance.
He walked by a word he could not see. He walked by a word he could not see. Night covered the sky. God pointed him toward the stars beyond counting, a future held by divine oath.
He lifted his eyes from uncertainty. He believed the impossible. That trust became his righteousness, and the promise grew firmer.
The promise walked beside him.
dusk settled on Abram, a strange heaviness wrapped around him. The shadows grew thick, the waiting pressed into his chest. He drove the birds away from the offer. The silence deepened, darkness grew heavier than night. A presence approached with purpose. I bind myself to you. This covenant stands. I bind myself to you. This covenant stands. God spoke of a distant future, a people oppressed for many years. Judgment on the oppressor, return to the promised land at the chosen time. The borders were spoken, rivers and lands named with certainty. Nations listed with clarity, a claim laid out by God Himself. I bind myself to this covenant stand. I bind myself to this covenant stands. A fire pot appeared, a torch followed behind. Both moved between the pieces. God walked the path alone. Abram watched without a step of his own. The promise depended only on God. I bind myself to this covenant stand. I bind myself to this covenant stands. The night closed around the promise, but the promise did not move. Sarah listened from the tent. The promise sounded unreasonable. Her years stood against it. Her body offered no strength. Yet the Lord spoke with certainty, and the word carried power.
Abraham heard the same pledge. He bowed with wonder and confusion. Yet even his questions did not break the promise. The Lord repeated the same assurance. A son would come from the barren place. The future rested on God alone. Laughter turned from doubt to joy. Laughter turned from doubt to joy. Child arrived, Isaac cried his first cry. The household felt the weight of waiting fall away. Every earlier question faded. God had done exactly what He said, and joy filled the tent. Neighbors heard the news. Sarah spoke with steady clarity. share in the joy. Her voice carried gratitude, her life carried proof of the promise. Laughter turned from doubt to joy. Laughter turned from doubt to joy. The child grew under favor, the covenant moved forward. Every year strengthened the truth. God keeps what he declares. Human weakness never stops him. The promise that began with one man now stood in the arms of a mother. Isaac carried the future without knowing it. Blessing rested on him, and the path stretched ahead. Laughter turned from doubt to joy. Laughter turned from doubt to joy.
Joy remained after the voices quieted.
The promise continued without strain.
Jacob sent his family across the river. He remained behind in the darkness. Old fear rose in his memory. Esau approached with many men. The past pressed hard against him. He stood alone without answers. Suddenly a stranger seized him. Strength met strength in silence. The night held the struggle, neither yielded. Jacob gripped with desperate resolve, refusing to let go. Every moment demanded endurance. Dust rose from the ground, their bodies locked in strain. The hours stretched without relief. The night tested his spirit. He pressed on without retreat. Your name will change. The blessing stands. Dawn began to rise. The stranger asked to be released. Jacob refused without blessing. His resolve exposed the truth. He sought more than escape. He sought the God who confronted him. The touch that weakened his hip also confirmed the encounter. Pain marked him, yet he held to the promise. He would not walk the same way again. He carried a wound and a gift. Your name will change. The blessing stands. Israel became his new name, the one who wrestled with God and endured the struggle. His past loosened its grip, his future opened with clarity. The river behind him, the meeting ahead, but he was no longer the same man. He limped toward the rising sun, every step a reminder that the Lord had met him. His fear began to settle, courage replaced hiding. His new name held firm. Your name will change. The blessing stands. The sun rose without hesitation. Israel walked forward with a wounded strength. Joseph walked toward his brothers without suspicion. His father had sent him with simple purpose. The field stretched out before him. He carried trust as his only protection. The brothers saw him from a distance, their hearts already hardened. Conspiracy formed with quiet anger. They spoke of ending his life. Reuben resisted with a weary voice, so they chose another path. The pit waited like an open mouth. Darkness swallowed him with no warning. He called out from the hollow place. No comfort arose from above. Footsteps moved away, voices drifted without concern. Despair edged close to him. He clung to what he knew of God. What man intended for harm, God would turn in time. A caravan approached. The brothers pulled him out, not for mercy, but for silver. Strangers bound him. The road toward Egypt open without pause. He looked back only once. The land of his father faded. He felt the weight of captivity. He did not know the coming years, but God remained near, even when silence seemed absolute. What man intended for harm, God would turn in time. Chains could not break the purpose. Exile could not erase the promise.
Suffering became the narrow path through which the future would take shape. The Lord stayed with him, though no one else saw it. Joseph entered Egypt as a foreign slave, a life reduced to the will of others. Yet seeds of coming authority lay hidden in these early wounds. The story moved forward, led by a hand he could not see. What men intended for harm, God would turn in time. His steps faded into the streets of Egypt, but God watched every moment. Joseph waited in a foreign prison, days blended without promise. Yet the Lord stayed with him, his character sharpened in silence. The cupbearer forgot him, but God did not forget. Pharaoh dreamed with no answer. The court fell quiet, fear pressed the palace. Only then the cupbearer remembered a young man in the prison depths, one who listened to God. God lifted the forgotten one. Joseph stood before Pharaoh. He refused credit for interpretation. The Lord will answer your need. His words carried certainty. The dreams unfolded with clarity. 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of hunger. Pharaoh saw wisdom in him. Authority shifted without hesitation. Prison chains became distant memory. Egypt turned to Joseph for guidance. Storehouses filled under his command. The land prepared for the coming famine. God lifted the forgotten one. The famine arrived with severity. Nations traveled to Egypt. Bread waited in Joseph's hand. The path that began in betrayal now held salvation for many. God had shaped every step, even the painful ones. His brothers came seeking grain. They bowed without knowing. Recognition struck Joseph. Grace rose where judgment could have stood.
that cast him away, now found life through him. God lifted the forgotten one. Brothers returned with fear in their steps. Joseph waited with a steady heart. He had tested their honesty, had seen the change in them. Grace rose where revenge could have spoken. Mercy shaped the future. He revealed himself with tears. Their shock held them silent. He drew them close. He spoke of God's guidance, not their failure, but God's intention to preserve life. Oh, the news reached Jacob, age and sorrow weighed on him, but hope stirred again. His son was alive. The journey to Egypt began. The promise traveled with them. The promise did not break. Caravans carried the family south. The land of Canaan fell behind. Egypt opened its gates. Joseph stood ready. Provision waited in a foreign place. The family found shelter. Goshen became their home. Growth began quietly. A nation formed within another nation. Generations multiplied. The covenant remained steady. God stayed with them. The promise did not break. Jacob blessed his sons, each with words shaped by truth. He leaned on his staff, strength nearly gone, yet faith unshaken. He saw the future from afar. He knew God would bring them out again. Joseph remained faithful. He carried his father with honor. He spoke reassurance to his brothers. You meant harm, but God shaped it for good. The story held firm. The promise did not break. The promise did not break. Egypt held them for a season, but God prepared the next chapter. The covenant waited, steady as ever.